But what happens, now we're focusing on foreign policy, is not really a new world power. In fact, a very old world power emerges again in a new form. Because as I told you, the Mesopotamian region, and I would like to put the map on the board just to remind you of the general shape of the region. We have modern-day Turkey up here. We have Egypt down here. This rectangle over here is Palestine. And then over here, in a sense, directly east of Israel, but because of the routes, always regarded as north of Israel, because between them was impassable desert. As far as they were, I don't even know if they knew they were on the other side of the desert. Do you understand that? Like, would they conceptualize, oh yeah, the Mesopotamians, they're right on the other side of the desert, but we can't go that way, we got to go up and around. I'm wondering if they just thought about it as a place you had to go up and around, and they didn't even know it was on the other side of the desert. But in any case, over here is the area that we call Mesopotamia. And one of the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia is experiencing a resurgence in their power. And they are the nation of Assyria. And this too is a difficult name to distinguish because it's spelled like and it looks exactly like Syria with an A and an S at the beginning of it. It is a completely different country. In Hebrew, I don't even think they look alike. I mean, those are just English correspondence to the Hebrew terms. Syria is usually the Hebrew word Aram. Doesn't sound anything like Syria. But anyway, Assyria distinguished from Syria. Assyria is in resurgence and is increasingly expanding its influence, starting over here, around the region. And, of course, when you start exerting your influence around the region, the first place you're going to hit is Palestine. So all of the little countries in this region, and Israel is only one of them. I guess if I was going to draw this in a little bit more detail than I will ever expect you to know, by the way, I'd have, this would be Israel, this would be Judah, this would be Edom, over here would be Moab, over here would be Ammon. I'm just going to put these up here so I have something to point to. And over here would be Syria, and over here would be Phoenicia, and over here would be Philistia. Now, I'm not interested in having you learn all those individual names or where they are. What I'm interested in making you aware of is that although we've been focusing on Israel, what we actually have in this region of Palestine are a lot of little nations, roughly equal with each other in power and development, with the possible exception of Syria, which is a little bit bigger and more powerful, and with the definite exception of Phoenicia, which is much more sophisticated, much more advanced culture. So anyway, that's what we have in the region. So, as Assyria, Tigris, Euphrates, Assyria is up here. Capital of Assyria, Nineveh. Nineveh, Assyria. As they start exerting their influence beyond their own region down south, well, they hit all of these little nations. And every one of these little nations has to somehow develop a foreign policy on how to handle the Assyrian threat. They're going to have to decide whether they're going to give in to the Assyrians, whether they're going to cooperate with the Assyrians, whether they're going to bargain with the Assyrians, whether they're going to fight the Assyrians, whether they're going to make an alliance with some of the other little nations and try to... All those things are up in the air. And every king, with the help of his advisors, has to decide what to do. And that's the situation that we're about to come upon. It's a big jump now, but I'd like you to turn to 2 Kings chapter 16. And here, very briefly, you're going to have to keep track of 3 separate kings, each ruling in their own area. Because this is the story of the relationships between these 3 kings. This is on page 486. It's chapter 16, beginning with verse 1. In the 17th year of Pekah, son of Remaliah, King Ahaz, son of Jotham of Judah, began to reign. So, if I guess I'm going to use this, I'll just remake this map. Judah and Jerusalem down here, Israel, Samaria. Okay, so Pekah, this is really going to help follow the action if you keep these 3 guys straight. Pekah, I think that's the way it's pronounced, is king of Israel ruling from Samaria. What is the name, from what I just read, of the southern king, the king of Judah? When I first started reading this stuff, I would sometimes make charts just to kind of keep everybody straight. That's what I'm trying to do now. What's the name of the king of Judah? The current king of Judah as this narrative is happening. Ahaz, right. It's the same name we ran across before. So Ahaz, the son of Jotham, did it say? I mean, you can see a lot of these names. What?
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of these names, they just keep repeating themselves in different people. Is the king in Judah. Northern king, southern king. Read on. Ahaz was 20 years old when he began to reign. That's kind of significant. It's kind of young. His father obviously died before he had completely finished his training. He reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. And here we get the what I call the Deuteronomic evaluation. He did not do what was right in the sight of Yahweh, his God, as his ancestor David had done. But he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel. Now, do you see what's happening there? Saying, this guy Ahaz was as bad as those lousy kings in Israel, and we all know how bad they are. Well, this guy Ahaz was just as bad. Now, look at the way his behavior is described. He even made his son pass through fire, according to the abominable practices of the nations whom Yahweh drove out before the people of Israel. He sacrificed and made offerings on the high places, on the hills, and under every green tree. So, what is it that makes Ahaz as bad as those lousy northern kings? Well, the first is probably the most serious. That is, he causes his son to pass through the fire. What this is probably referring to is, and most commonly, an Ammonite practice of heating up one of their idols. The way I once heard it, although I don't know if this is archaeologically verified, makes a good story though, is they heat up an idol that has outstretched hands, and then when the idol is red hot, they put their children on it. What we're talking about here is sacrifice of children to a god. So if an Israelite king were to be doing something like that, or even worse, from the Deuteronomist perspective, a king from Judah, well, that's as bad as it got at the very end of the book of Judges, when everyone was doing what was right in their own eyes. So that's the first and the most serious offense. The other one, I guess it's one, he sacrificed and made offerings on the high places, on the hills, and under every green tree. First response, I suppose, would be, well, what's wrong with that? Anyone have any idea? Why is that considered such a horrible offense that is listed with baby sacrifice? Anybody, or does that just go right by you and you don't really have any understanding of why that's considered so bad? Interesting. Okay. No, I'm you know, that's, I need to know that. When I say those kind of things, then I maybe assume that you knew. You need to tell me that. Let me draw out a few possibilities here. I don't think it's an easy question. On one sense, I think what the Deuteronomists might be pointing to is the decentralization of worship. That is, from the Deuteronomic perspective, the only proper place to engage in cultic worship of Yahweh, and I don't know how that could have been managed because you couldn't have all of Israel going there regularly, so they set apart 3 days of the year when everybody needs to come down to Jerusalem, and skeleton crews will remain, I guess. Anyway, any worship any cultic, any corporate worship of Yahweh outside of Jerusalem, any sacrifice of animals outside of Jerusalem to Yahweh was somehow considered wrong and sinful. The Deuteronomists wanted all of the power and cultic authority to rest in the hands of the Davidic dynasty. That's just plain what he believed.